A millionaire ordered that an old woman be removed from his restaurant because she smelled like rubbish, and he said she should never enter that place again. But he had no idea who she was, nor what life had in store for him after that humiliation. Maisie, an elderly woman, sick and with tired eyes, entered the fancy restaurant holding a folder of documents tightly. Her very simple clothes and grey hair showed she was someone who had lived a long life, but still carried an inner strength that showed she had a lot of purpose left. As she walked across the room towards a distant waiter, she noticed the people around her, most of them busy with their own problems and meals, each in their own world. She was there to discuss an important matter, the recycling of the restaurant's waste. For Maisie, working with recycling wasn't just a job, but a mission she embraced with her whole heart and soul. She knew that every small gesture, every piece of recycled waste, could make a real difference in the world and for future generations. "Hello, how are you? I had scheduled a meeting with the manager to talk about the recycling of the restaurant's waste. I ended up being a bit late because of the work I do," Maisie said to the waiter. "I'm not aware of anything, ma'am, but I'll let Jonathan, my manager, know about it. Please have a seat here. I'll be back in a second," he replied. She sat down at the table, carefully arranging the papers in front of her, waiting for the manager with whom she had the meeting scheduled. Around her, a few curious glances appeared, but Maisie was focused on her task. However, the smell of recycling items and the cleaning products she used daily in her recycling job started to mix with the aroma of the meals in the restaurant. She realized that the smell stood out in that sophisticated environment, but there wasn't much she could do about it at the moment. While she waited patiently, a waiter approached, offering a glass of water with a shy smile. Maisie thanked him, feeling a slight discomfort from being out of her usual environment, but she kept her composure. What Maisie didn't know was that her presence there, at that very moment, was about to set off a series of events that would change her life forever. Archie, a man in an impeccable suit with a haughty look, entered the restaurant as if he were a star. He was the kind of person who made sure to be noticed, and his presence imposed a certain discomfort on anyone nearby. He approached Maisie's table, but soon wrinkled his nose, bothered by a smell he found out of place in such a refined environment. He looked around, searching for the source of the discomfort, until his eyes landed on Maisie. The disdain on his face was immediate. Without a second thought, Archie stood up and called the waiter with a snap of his fingers, drawing the attention of everyone around. "Hey you," he said in a firm and arrogant voice. "What is this woman doing here? This smell is unbearable. How do you expect customers to eat with this?" The waiter, visibly uneasy, tried to calm Archie. "Mr. Archie, please, I'm sorry. She's here for a meeting with Jonathan. She said she had a meeting about the recyclable waste." Archie snorted, impatient. "Is Jonathan out of his mind? No, no, no. I want her moved outside. This is a high-class restaurant, not a rubbish bin." Maisie, who had been trying to focus on the documents in front of her, looked up, surprised and hurt by the young man's words. Her eyes met Archie's, but he just looked away, as if she wasn't worthy of his attention. The waiter hesitated, but before he could say anything, Archie spoke again, this time louder, attracting even more stares. "Now, or you and Jonathan will be out on the street today along with her." Maisie felt the weight of Archie's words like a punch in the stomach. The restaurant, which had seemed just like a place out of her routine, now turned into a stage of shame and humiliation. She realized that everyone around had stopped what they were doing, their eyes fixed on her, full of curiosity and in some cases disdain. The waiter, still uncomfortable, approached Maisie with a guilty look on his face, as if he were responsible for the situation. "Ma'am?" he began in a low voice, almost a whisper. I'm really sorry, but that man over there, he's the owner of the restaurant, and he's asked you to leave." Maisie, who had always maintained a firm stance in the face of problems, felt her heart tighten. Those words hit her hard, but she didn't want to create more embarrassment for anyone, especially not for the young waiter who seemed so unsettled. With a slight nod, she began gathering her papers with trembling hands, trying not to let the tears that threatened to form fall. "It's all right, young man," she replied with forced calmness. "I'm done here anyway, and I'm sorry." As she stood up, Maisie noticed that the room seemed even quieter, as if even the cutlery had stopped touching the plates. She didn't look at Archie or the people around her. Keeping her eyes down, she walked towards the door, feeling each step like a weight on her shoulders. It was as if the ground was sinking beneath her feet. Just as she was about to leave, the restaurant manager, who was late for the meeting, met her at the entrance. "Miss Maisie, are you leaving already? We can talk now if you'd like." Maisie, trying to maintain her dignity, smiled sadly. "Don't worry, dear. I think today isn't the right day for this. The owner of this place doesn't accept people like me here." Maisie left the restaurant with slow steps, feeling the cold afternoon wind caress her face. Behind her tired eyes there was a heavy secret, one she had been carrying silently for months. Walking through the busy streets, her mind returned to that doctor's office where everything had changed. Sitting in an uncomfortable chair, she remembered the doctor, with a serious expression, carefully choosing his words to deliver the news. "Miss Maisie," he began, "the tests have shown something we need to discuss. Unfortunately, your diagnosis isn't the best. The cancer is in an advanced stage, and although we can try some treatments, the chances of success are small. You probably have only a few years, maybe even less." At that moment, Maisie felt the world crumble around her, but she didn't show it. She knew she had to be strong, not for herself, but for her daughter Ellie, who depended on her. There was no room for despair, no time for regrets. Maisie smiled at the doctor, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "Thank you for being honest, doctor. I know you're doing your best." And so, Maisie kept that pain hidden in a corner of her heart. She didn't tell anyone, not Ellie, nor the few friends she had left. She continued with her life, getting up every day to work with recycling, trying to keep things in order as she always did. But every night when she lay in bed, the weight of that secret suffocated her. She knew her days were numbered, but she didn't want anyone else to carry that burden with her. There was so much to be done, and she was determined to leave a legacy for her daughter, something that would make Ellie proud, even when she was no longer around. So, Maisie faced each day with quiet courage, hiding the pain behind smiles and kind gestures. But the fear was always there, hidden in every distant look, in every sigh. And no one, absolutely no one, could imagine the size of the battle that woman was fighting alone. Maisie walked through the busy streets, trying to shake off the weight of that bitter experience in the restaurant, with every new place she observed as she walked. What that arrogant man, Archie, didn't know was that his cruel words didn't just hurt Maisie's pride. They touched a wound that had been open for a long time. She struggled to keep her head up, but inside Maisie felt a whirlwind of emotions. The humiliation she suffered in that restaurant wouldn't leave her mind. She wondered how someone could be so insensitive, so blind to the suffering of others. Archie's words echoed in her head, but what hurt the most was the feeling of helplessness, of being invisible in a world that seemed not to care. Maisie headed home, where memories of the good times with her late husband and Ellie's childhood brought some comfort. Each step she took seemed heavier than the last, as if the sadness was piling up on her shoulders, making the walk increasingly difficult. She knew she couldn't let herself be beaten. She had to keep going, continue with her recycling work, keep the house in order for Ellie. Maisie was determined not to let that incident define her future, but the bitterness remained, eating away at her soul. She thought about the unfairness of life, how good people were mistreated while the arrogant, like Archie, seemed to thrive without consequence. Maisie, however, had no idea that Archie would cross her path again in a way she could never have imagined. To her, he was just a cruel figure in a painful memory. But fate had other plans. Archie, that same young man who humiliated her, would be a key part of a twist that was about to change everything. The months passed and life went on as it always does. Maisie, despite the burden she carried, tried to keep a serene expression, dedicating herself to her home and recycling. Ellie, her daughter, was her greatest pride and joy. A young woman full of life and dreams who always made sure to fill the house with energy and hope, even when Maisie felt most down. One afternoon, while Maisie was preparing dinner, Ellie entered the kitchen with a radiant smile on her face. She was visibly excited, as if she had news she couldn't wait to share. "Mum, there's someone I want you to meet," Ellie said, her eyes shining with happiness. Maisie looked at her daughter, curious. "Oh, really? Who would that be?" Ellie came closer, holding her mother's hands with a gentleness that revealed how important that moment was for her. "It's Logan, Mum, my boyfriend. I'm so happy, and I wanted you to meet him, and I wanted—" Maisie smiled, pleased to see her daughter so happy. She always wanted the best for Ellie, and if Logan made her feel this way, she was more than willing to welcome him with open arms. "I'd love to meet him, my dear. When will you bring him over for dinner?" Ellie squeezed her mother's hands tighter, as if trying to transfer all her joy to her. "Actually, I was thinking of bringing him over tonight, if that's okay." Maisie laughed softly, touched by Ellie's excitement. "Of course it's not a problem, darling. I'll prepare something special." As Ellie went upstairs to get ready, Maisie returned to the kitchen, feeling warmth in her heart. It was good to see her daughter so in love, something that made her forget, if only for a moment, the pains and worries she carried in silence. A few hours later, the doorbell rang. Ellie rushed down the stairs, her smile wider than ever. She opened the door, revealing Logan, a tall young man with strong features and a presence that seemed to light up the room. He entered the house, offering Maisie a bouquet of flowers with a shy smile. "These are for you, Miss Maisie. Ellie talks about you all the time," he said, his voice full of respect. Maisie accepted the flowers, thanking him with a warm smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Logan. Make yourself at home." Logan looked around, admiring the cozy simplicity of the place. But as he settled on the sofa, something in his expression changed for a brief moment, as if a distant memory was trying to surface. Maisie, however, didn't notice. She was happy to see Ellie so excited, and Logan's presence only reinforced how much her daughter was involved in this new phase of life, which was very important to her. Knowing that someone would take care of her daughter when she left this world to rest. At that moment, none of the three knew how connected they were. Maisie had no idea that Logan was the son of the man who had humiliated her in the restaurant months ago. And Ellie, completely unaware of the past, only saw the bright future she and Logan could build together. But fate, always full of twists, was already beginning to weave the threads of a revelation that would change everything. While Maisie began to nurture a new hope seeing Ellie so happy with Logan, in another part of the city, Archie was immersed in his own ambitious plans. He had grown up in a world where power and money solved everything, and for him, building a new restaurant in a prime location was just another way to expand his empire. He knew exactly the spot he wanted, an old house with a large plot of land, perfect for the project he had in mind. Sitting in his luxurious office, Archie flipped through the documents with a calculating expression. "This is where I want the new restaurant," he said, pointing to the map on the table in front of his lawyer, a seasoned man of few words. The lawyer, looking at the property, nodded. "It's an excellent location, sir. Large space close to several busy routes. We can make a generous offer and acquire the land quickly. I believe the people who own it are humble." Archie smiled, confident. "Exactly. I don't see why they would refuse. Besides, it's just a plot of land that's not being used for anything significant. It's a useful land in the hands of poor people who don't know how to value what they have." The lawyer agreed. "I'll prepare the paperwork and make the offer this week." What Archie didn't know was that the useful land in the hands of poor people belonged to Maisie, the woman he had humiliated in the restaurant months before. To him, Maisie was nothing more than a forgotten figure from an ordinary afternoon. The connection between them was something that had never crossed his mind. Meanwhile, Maisie was at home, tidying up the backyard where she stored and sorted recyclable materials, a job she took seriously and did with love. That house wasn't just a home, it was a symbol of her family's history and her own struggle for survival. Every piece of land, every wall carried memories she deeply cherished. The next day, when Archie's lawyer arrived at Maisie's house, he greeted her formally and handed her the papers with the proposal. Maisie, surprised to see a lawyer at her door, accepted the documents, but her expression grew serious as she read the contents. "They want to buy my house?" Maisie murmured, her eyes wide with disbelief. She looked at the lawyer, who simply confirmed with a nod. "Ma'am, I understand you haven't had time to consider the offer, but our client is willing to negotiate the terms if necessary and resolve this as quickly as possible. It's a generous offer, ma'am. The buyer is willing to pay well above the market value. It could be a great opportunity for you and your family." Maisie felt a chill down her spine. This was her home, the place where she had raised Ellie, where she devoted herself to the recycling work that meant so much to her. It wasn't just about money. "Tell your client my house is not for sale," Maisie replied firmly, holding the papers in her hand, trying to return them to the lawyer. The lawyer frowned, surprised by her refusal. "May I ask why, ma'am? The amount offered is considerable. It could provide you with a comfortable future for the rest of your life." Maisie took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "This house was built by my grandfather. My father grew up here, I grew up here, and my daughter grew up here. Every wall, every tree in the garden has a story. And it's not just history. It's love, it's sacrifice, it's our life. It's not something that can be bought with money." She paused, looking around. "I know to you, it's just a piece of land in a good location, but to me, it's my family's legacy. It's where we built our lives, where we faced challenges, and where we celebrated victories. I can't just sell that." The lawyer tried to insist further, but Maisie didn't budge. "Are you sure? Do you understand the change this could bring to your life? You could think it over, discuss it with your family." Maisie shook her head, keeping her voice firm, but now with a touch of sadness. "It's not about money. There are things money can't buy, and this house is one of them. Tell your client I appreciate the offer, but my decision is final." The lawyer refused to take the papers back and left, realizing that insisting would be pointless. Maisie spent the night awake with the documents still on the kitchen table. The offer was tempting, much more money than she could ever imagine seeing in her life, but the price she would have to pay was too high. The house she lived in wasn't just a building. It was a home full of memories, where every corner told a part of her story and her family's story. When Archie received the news that the offer had been refused, he could hardly believe it. He wasn't used to hearing no, especially in business matters. He rose from his chair with an expression of irritation and disbelief. Who was this person to refuse such a generous proposal? The fury began to rise within him, and he decided that if he needed to handle this personally, then so be it. That same afternoon, Archie got into his luxury car and drove to the address listed in the documents. The neighborhood was on the border between three areas, two of which were middle class, while one was wealthy. But he only wanted to resolve the issue quickly and move on with his plans. When he parked in front of the house, Archie got out of the car, adjusting his suit with an air of superiority. He looked around, assessing the place like an investor evaluating a property. The house was modest, with a well-kept garden and an old tree that provided shade to the yard. The wide view around meant the restaurant would attract a lot of attention there. It was exactly the kind of place he expected to demolish to make way for his new restaurant. Archie approached the door and rang the bell, waiting impatiently. When Maisie opened the door, it took her a second to recognize the man in front of her. She was surprised to see the same face that had been the source of so much humiliation months earlier. Archie, on the other hand, had no idea who was standing before him. "Good afternoon," Archie said, in a controlled tone that didn't hide his impatience. "I'm Archie Thompson. I'm here to discuss your refusal to sell this place." Maisie kept her composure, despite the wave of emotions that hit her upon seeing him. She remembered every cruel word he had said in that restaurant, but she knew she had to stay firm. "I've already given my answer to your lawyer, Mr. Thompson," she replied, her voice calm. "This house is not for sale." Archie didn't expect such resistance. He forced a smile, trying to appear more friendly. "I understand that this house has sentimental value for you, but I'm willing to increase the offer. We can negotiate a price that's fair for both of us." Maisie took a deep breath, feeling the tension in the air. "It's not a matter of money, Mr. Thompson. I cannot sell this house. It means much more than you can imagine." Archie began to lose his patience. "Everything has a price, ma'am. Think about what you could do with the money. You could move to a better place, buy new clothes, secure a dignified future." Before he could continue, Maisie interrupted him. "It's not just a house, Mr. Thompson. It's where my family has lived for generations, where we built our lives. I won't destroy that for the sake of a restaurant." Archie looked at her incredulous. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, and the frustration began to turn into something closer to anger. "Do you really think you can stop this? That you can resist this offer indefinitely? Think about the opportunity you're having. People would kill for this." Maisie held Archie's gaze, her eyes shining with a mix of pain and determination. "I'm not going to sell. And if you can't understand that, then maybe you should rethink what's really important in life. Archie was silent for a moment, unsure of how to respond. That simple elderly woman was showing a strength he hadn't expected. He, who always thought money could buy everything, was beginning to realize that perhaps he was wrong. Even so, he didn't want to admit defeat. With a brusque nod, Archie turned and walked back to his car, leaving Maisie alone at the door. As he drove back to his office, Maisie's face wouldn't leave his mind. There was something in the way she stood up to him that deeply troubled him, something he couldn't understand. But one thing was certain: this battle was far from over. Still irritated by Maisie's refusal, Archie decided that he needed a new approach. He felt that something was escaping him, something he needed to understand better. So, 2 days after the first visit, he decided to return to the house, but this time with a more observant disposition. He was determined to find out why that simple woman was so determined to keep her house and, perhaps, finally convince her to sell. When Maisie opened the door again, Archie tried to soften his expression. She looked at him with a mix of distrust and weariness, but let him in. "What more do you want, Mr. Thompson?" she asked, keeping her voice firm but without hostility. "I'd like to have a calmer conversation with you," he said. Archie entered the house, noticing details he had missed before. The simplicity of the place contrasted with the elegance of his own world, but there was something comforting there, something that made Archie feel strangely out of place and, at the same time, connected. As he walked through the living room, Archie found himself thinking about his own life, so different, but at that moment, so distant from anything real. He sat on the sofa, feeling the softness of the old fabric, and finally looked at Maisie, who was standing near the window, her eyes fixed on him. Something in her gaze began to feel familiar, an unsettling sense of déjà vu that made him frown. Archie studied her for a moment, trying to connect the dots in his mind. And then, like a lightning bolt, the memory returned. "You," Archie murmured, his eyes widening in surprise. "You're the woman from the restaurant." Maisie's face hardened slightly, but she said nothing, waiting for Archie to process the revelation. He stood up slowly, as if seeing Maisie for the first time. The memory of the afternoon when he humiliated her came back strongly, every cruel word he had spoken, every look of disdain. Archie felt a weight fall on him, a deep discomfort he wasn't used to feeling. I didn't know," Archie said, almost to himself. "I didn't realize it was you." Maisie finally spoke, her voice calm but laden with contained emotion. "And now that you know, what does it change, Mr. Thompson? Wasn't it enough to humiliate me that day? Now you want to take my house too?" Archie was speechless for a moment, feeling guilt creeping in under his usual arrogance. He, who had always prided himself on being unshakable, felt strangely vulnerable in front of this woman he barely knew, but who somehow seemed to understand everything about him. I'm sorry," he said, the words coming out with difficulty. "I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. It was unacceptable." Maisie watched him in silence, letting the apology hang in the air. Archie expected a response, a reaction, but she remained still, just looking at him with an expression that was both painful and compassionate. He realized then that this wasn't a situation that could be fixed with words or money. Something much deeper was at play, something he didn't know how to deal with. Feeling unsettled and uncertain for the first time in a long time, Archie lowered his head, unsure of how to continue. And in that heavy silence, he began to realize that perhaps there was much more to learn from this woman than he had ever imagined. The atmosphere in Maisie's house was tense, and Ellie noticed it as soon as she got home that evening. There was something in the air, a sense that something important had happened. Maisie, sitting on the sofa, seemed distant, lost in deep thoughts. Ellie approached, worried. "Mum, is everything all right?" Ellie asked softly, sitting down beside her mother. Maisie took a moment to respond, but when she finally did, her voice was heavy with emotion. "Ellie, there's something you need to know." Before she could continue, the door opened and Logan walked in, bringing with him an energy that until that moment had always been welcome. But now, there was something strange about his presence. He stopped when he saw Maisie's expression, and concern immediately showed on his face. "What happened?" Logan asked, looking from Ellie to Maisie, sensing that something serious was about to be revealed. Maisie looked at Logan with eyes full of a sadness he didn't understand. "Logan, do you know who your father is?" Logan was confused for a moment, not understanding the reason for the question. "Of course it's Archie Thompson, but why are you asking that now?" Ellie felt the air leave her lungs, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place in her mind. "Mum, Archie, is he the man who tried to buy our house?" Maisie nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on Logan, as if wanting him to understand the weight of that revelation. "Yes, Ellie, and he was also the man who humiliated me at the restaurant months ago." The revelation hit like a bomb in the room. Ellie and Logan remained silent, processing the shocking connection between their families. Ellie felt a wave of anger and sadness flood her chest, while Logan seemed completely shaken. I didn't know," Logan murmured, looking at Ellie with an expression of pain. "Ellie, I swear I didn't know. Ellie, fighting to hold back tears, looked at Logan, feeling a mix of love and betrayal. "Logan, how could this happen? How could your father do something so horrible?" Logan moved closer to Ellie, trying to hold her hands, but she pulled away, still processing everything. "Ellie, my father, he's not an easy person, I know, but I never imagined he had done something like that to your mother. I'm so sorry." Maisie, seeing the weight the situation was placing on the young couple, tried to intervene. "Ellie, Logan, I know this is hard, but don't let your parents' past destroy what you have. You two have something special, something that shouldn't be tainted by others' mistakes." Ellie, still shaken, looked at her mother, seeing the strength and wisdom she had always admired, but she also saw the pain Maisie had carried in silence for so long. "Mum, I don't know what to do. This is so complicated." Maisie stood up, placing her hands on Ellie's shoulders, trying to offer some comfort. "You'll figure it out, dear. But one thing I know, love is stronger than any hurt, and you and Logan need to decide if what you feel for each other is enough to overcome all this." Logan, still in shock, looked at Ellie, his eyes pleading. "Ellie, please tell me we can get through this together. I'm so ashamed of my father." Ellie was silent for a moment, the internal conflict evident on her face. But when she looked at Logan, she saw not Archie's son, but the man she loved. "Logan, I need some time to think, but know that no matter what happens, I love you. I just need time." Logan nodded, understanding Ellie's request even though it hurt deeply. Maisie watched the two, knowing that this situation would test not only their relationship, but also what she and Archie would learn from this entire upheaval. Silence settled over the room, but it wasn't the end of the conversation. It was just the beginning of a complicated journey that would demand more from everyone than they ever imagined. The revelation had a profound effect on Maisie's household in the days following the truth about Archie. Ellie and Logan could hardly talk without the shadow of the past interfering with every word. The atmosphere, once filled with laughter and hope, was now heavy with uncertainty and pain. Maisie watched all of this in silence, feeling the weight of the situation on her already tired shoulders. She knew there was more that needed to be said, a truth she had been holding on to for a long time and could no longer keep hidden. On a particularly quiet evening, Maisie decided it was time to speak. She called Ellie and Logan into the living room, where the soft light of the lamps created an almost intimate yet somber atmosphere. Ellie, noticing the seriousness in her mother's eyes, sat down beside her, holding her hand. Logan, still uncomfortable with the whole situation, stood nearby, unsure of what to expect. "I need to talk to you," Maisie began, her voice calm but firm. "There's something I've been hiding from everyone, something you have the right to know." Ellie squeezed her mother's hand, feeling a chill run down her spine. "Mum, what is it? You're scaring me." Maisie took a deep breath, struggling to keep her composure. "A few months ago, I was diagnosed with a terminal illness, advanced cancer. The doctor gave me little time, maybe a few more months, maybe a year. I'm not sure." The impact of Maisie's words hit Ellie like a punch in the stomach. She was left breathless, her eyes wide with shock and pain. "Mum, no, it can't be." Logan, equally shocked, stepped forward, feeling the need to comfort Ellie, but also to deal with his own disbelief. "Miss Maisie, why didn't you tell us before?" Maisie looked at both of them, tears forming in her eyes but keeping her voice steady. "I didn't want you to live with that pain before it was necessary. I wanted you to have the chance to be happy, to build something beautiful together without that burden. But now, seeing what's happening, I realize I can't hide it anymore. You need to know what's coming." Ellie began to cry, unable to hold back the tears. She hugged her mother tightly, feeling as if the ground was opening up beneath her feet. "Mum, please, no, I don't know what I'll do without you. I'm not ready for this." Maisie stroked Ellie's hair, trying to give her strength even though she herself felt fragile. "I know, dear. I know it's hard, but you're strong. You always have been, and you have Logan by your side. You two need each other now, more than ever." Logan came closer, placing his hand on Ellie's shoulder, trying to offer some comfort, but he was also dealing with a wave of emotions, including guilt for his father causing so much pain to the woman in front of him. "Miss Maisie, I'm so sorry for everything. I swear I'll be here for Ellie. I'll take care of her, whatever she needs." Maisie nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and sadness. "Logan, I believe you, and I know that you and Ellie can find a way together, despite everything that's happening." Silence filled the room again, but this time it was a silence of shared grief, of love, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to face life and death with courage and honesty. Ellie continued to hug her mother, while Logan, now fully committed to supporting them both, joined the embrace, trying to find the strength together to face what was to come. Maisie knew that she had lifted a heavy burden that night, but she also knew that it would bring Ellie and Logan closer together. And although the future was uncertain, she felt a bit more at peace, knowing she was no longer carrying this weight alone. Archie couldn't get Maisie out of his mind. Ever since he recognized the woman he had humiliated, something inside him began to change. Her words, the quiet strength with which she faced him, and the revelation of her terminal illness weighed on him like an anchor. Archie, who had always been so sure of himself, so convinced that money and power could solve everything, now found himself facing a reality he couldn't control. After days of reflection and sleepless nights, Archie made a decision. He knew he had to do something he rarely did, admit he was wrong. He needed to apologize, not just out of politeness, but because deep down he felt he owed it to Maisie. Determined, he returned to the house he once saw only as an obstacle to his plans, but now represented something much greater. When Archie arrived, it was Logan who opened the door, visibly surprised to see him. "Dad?" Logan murmured, a mix of surprise and distrust in his voice. "Logan, I need to talk to Maisie," Archie said, without beating around the bush. There was an urgency in his voice that Logan wasn't used to hearing. Logan hesitated, but seeing the expression on his father's face, he nodded. "She's in the living room, you can go in." Archie entered the house, feeling smaller than ever. He found Maisie sitting on the sofa, looking out of the window with a distant gaze. When she noticed Archie's presence, she turned to him, not surprised, but with a calmness that only reinforced the seriousness of the moment. "Miss Maisie," Archie began, his voice a little hesitant. I'm here because I need to apologize." Maisie stared at him in silence, her expression neutral as if waiting for more. Archie felt the weight of what he had to say, but he knew he couldn't avoid it. "I was cruel, insensitive, and completely wrong in how I treated you that day at the restaurant," he continued, finding the words difficult to say but sincere. "I had no right to speak to you that way, to humiliate you, and I realize now how much that must have hurt you." Maisie remained silent, but Archie could see a slight change in her eyes, as if she was analyzing every word. He took a deep breath and continued, "And when I came to your house to try to buy it, I was so focused on my own interests that I didn't even realize who you were or what this house meant to you. I thought everything could be solved with money, but I was wrong. Very wrong." Archie took a step forward, his eyes fixed on Maisie's. "I can't undo what I did, and I can't take away the pain I caused, but I'm here to say I'm sorry, truly. If I could go back, I'd do everything differently." And if there's anything I can do to help in any way, please tell me." Maisie looked at him for a long moment, letting the silence fill the room. She could see the sincerity in Archie's face, a real change that perhaps only confronting his own mortality could bring. Finally, she nodded slightly, her eyes softening. "Mr. Thompson, your words are important and I accept them. But forgiveness isn't just about what you say. It's about what you do from here on." Archie, feeling a mix of relief and a new burden, nodded, understanding. "I understand. And I promise you, Maisie, I'll do my best to prove that I'm changing, that I want to be a better person." Maisie nodded, but she knew there was something deeper that needed to be said, something that went beyond apologies. "Archie, you need to understand that this house, it's not just a building. It's a symbol, not just for me, but for my family and what we've built together. The walls of this house tell stories of generations, of sacrifices, of love, of struggle. It's a legacy that goes far beyond material value." Archie, hearing those words, realized he was facing something he had never truly valued: the history that each person, each family, carries. For him, things had always been simple. Everything had a price. But in that moment, he understood that there were values money could never reach. Maisie continued, her gaze soft but determined. "What we leave behind, the memories we create, and the lessons we pass on, that's what really matters. And I want you to understand that, not just for me, but also for your own family. Because in the end, when everything else is gone, what's left are those memories and how we choose to be remembered." Archie, deeply touched by Maisie's words, felt a new understanding form within him. "You're right, Maisie. I've never thought of it that way. I've always seen things for what they could bring me, but never for what they truly mean." Maisie smiled gently, seeing the sincerity in Archie's eyes. "There's still time to change, Archie. Time for you to leave a legacy that goes beyond business, beyond money. A legacy that your family and future generations can be proud of." Archie, with a newfound respect for Maisie, nodded. "I promise you, Maisie, that I'll do everything I can to honor that. And if there's anything I can do to help preserve this house and everything it represents, I'm at your service." Maisie, feeling that an important chapter of her life was closing with peace, extended her hand to Archie, who shook it firmly and with respect. "Thank you, Archie. Let's see what the future holds for us. But regardless of that, it's good to know we can move forward without resentment." The two parted, no longer as adversaries, but as people who had learned from their mistakes and were now willing to walk a better path. Maisie felt a lightness in her heart, and as she watched Archie leave, she knew she had made the right choice. She had not only preserved her family's legacy, but also planted a seed of change in someone who had, for a long time, forgotten the true value of life. In the days following the decisive conversation between Maisie and Archie, the house began to find a little peace again. However, a new determination started to grow in Ellie and Logan. They knew Maisie's time was limited, but they wanted her legacy not only to survive, but to flourish in a way she could never have imagined. It was then, on a quiet afternoon, as Ellie and Logan talked on the porch, that an idea began to take shape. "Logan," Ellie said, her eyes fixed on the horizon, "I don't want my mum's work to end when she's gone. She dedicated her life to recycling, to preserving the environment, and she always did it alone, with limited resources. But what if we could take it further, turn what she started into something much bigger?" Logan, always admiring Ellie's passion, looked at her with a mix of pride and inspiration. "You're right, Ellie. We have the knowledge and the resources she never had. We can turn her work into something revolutionary. We can develop a recycling system that not only helps our community, but can be replicated elsewhere, creating a real impact." Ellie smiled, feeling a new energy within her. "I was thinking about how we could integrate cutting-edge technology, maybe something that combines recycling with renewable energy. I've heard of systems that turn waste into clean energy. What if we could do that here? Turn our home into a center for sustainable recycling innovation?" Logan was excited by the idea. "Yes, we can use the space we have here to create a prototype, something that shows how this can work in practice." And with my engineering knowledge and your contacts in the environmental field, we can create something truly innovative." Ellie's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "My mum always wanted more people to see the importance of recycling. If we can show how efficient this system is, we can attract attention and support to expand the project. This wouldn't just honor her work, it would ensure that it continues to positively impact the world." Logan took Ellie's hand, his gaze full of determination. "Let's do this, Ellie. Let's work together and make this a reality. Let's show your mum that her legacy will live on, not just in our hearts, but in concrete actions that can change the world." That night, as Ellie and Logan sketched out the first plans for their project, Maisie, who had overheard part of the conversation, felt deeply moved by the realization that her efforts would be carried forward in a way she had never dreamed of. With an emotional smile, she retired to bed, knowing that even when her time came to an end, her work, her passion, and her love for the world would continue to live on in Ellie and Logan, and in everything they were about to create together. The revolutionary recycling project began to take shape in the following days, with Ellie and Logan dedicating hours to research, experiments, and planning. Maisie's house became a laboratory of ideas, a factory of innovations that would not only preserve the environment, but also strengthen the bonds between all of them. What started as a desire to honor a legacy became a life mission, something that would unite the families and, who knows, inspire the world. As the days passed, Archie's transformation was evident to everyone around him. He, who had always been driven by ambition and the desire for financial success, began to feel that something was missing in his life. Maisie's words continued to echo in his mind, and he could no longer ignore the impact his actions had had on her and so many others. Archie found himself thinking more and more about the kind of legacy he wanted to leave, not just as a businessman, but as a human being. One day, while Archie was in his office, reviewing documents that once gave him great satisfaction, he found himself lost in thought. No number or contract seemed to hold the same allure anymore. He realized that all the money and success he had accumulated over the years hadn't brought him the fulfillment he had imagined. And it was then that, almost without realizing it, his thoughts returned to Maisie, to the strength with which she stood up for what she believed was right, and to the recycling project that Ellie and Logan were developing. Archie knew he needed to be part of it, not out of guilt or remorse, but because for the first time he felt he could actually do something meaningful, something that would benefit future generations and honor the memory of a woman he had treated so poorly. Determined, Archie picked up the phone and called Logan. "Logan," Archie began, his voice firm but filled with emotion, "I've been thinking a lot about what's happening, about the project you and Ellie are developing, and I'd like to help in some way." Logan, on the other end of the line, was surprised but also relieved. He knew his father was changing, but he didn't expect Archie to get so directly involved. "Dad, that means a lot to us. But why now?" Archie sighed, trying to find the right words. "I think I never really understood what was important in life, Logan. I spent so many years chasing success that I forgot to think about the impact my actions had on the people around me. But what Maisie and her family are doing, that's something worth doing. I want to be part of it. I want to help ensure this project reaches its full potential." Logan, feeling a mix of pride and emotion, replied, "Dad, it would be an honor to have you on board. We can really make a difference together." In the days that followed, Archie began to get directly involved in the project. He used his influence and resources to open doors that had previously been closed to Ellie and Logan. Meetings with investors, contacts with technology and sustainability experts, anything that was needed to ensure the success of the revolutionary recycling system. But more than that, Archie began working side by side with Maisie, Ellie, and Logan, learning about environmental challenges, about the small daily battles Maisie had fought alone for so long. One afternoon, as they worked together on the prototype, Archie looked at Maisie, who was patiently explaining how one of the machines worked. "You know, Maisie," he said with a genuine smile, "I never imagined I'd find so much meaning in something like this. I used to think success was measured in numbers, but now I see the real value is in the changes we can make in people's lives." Maisie looked at Archie, surprised and touched by the sincerity in his words. "Sometimes, Archie, the most important lessons come from the most unexpected places. I'm glad you're here with us, helping to turn this idea into reality." Archie smiled back, feeling for the first time in a long while that he was exactly where he needed to be. The project was no longer just a way to honor Maisie's legacy. It was a new direction for his own life, an opportunity to do something that truly mattered. And together, they began to see the fruits of their labor, knowing that they were creating not only an innovative recycling system, but also a new way of living, based on respect, collaboration, and above all, humanity. With the recycling project progressing, and Archie's presence becoming increasingly important in everyone's lives, Ellie and Logan began to think about the future they wanted to build together. The love between them, strengthened by the challenges they had faced, had become even deeper. They knew they were ready to take the next step and formalize the union that in many ways already existed. It was on a sunny afternoon while they were working in Maisie's garden that Logan made the decision. He was beside Ellie, covered in dirt and with a genuine smile lighting up his face, when he suddenly stopped and looked into her eyes. "Ellie," he began, with a sincerity that made her heart beat faster. "We've been through so much together, and I can't imagine my life without you by my side. I think it's time we do something that represents not just what we feel, but everything we've achieved together." Ellie, feeling tears of happiness welling up, smiled as Logan knelt down on the grass, gently taking her hand. "Will you marry me? Here, in this house that means so much to your mum, to us? I can't think of a better place to start our life together." Ellie's heart felt like it was about to burst with emotion. "Yes, Logan, I'll marry you. And I couldn't imagine a better place either. This house represents everything we are and everything we want to be." In the days that followed, Maisie's house was transformed into a haven of wedding preparations. The garden, which Maisie had tended to with so much love, would be the setting for the ceremony, and everyone got involved in the details. Maisie, though weak, found energy in the small tasks she could still do, determined to be part of this special moment. Archie, for his part, used his resources to ensure the wedding was perfect. But unlike before, he didn't try to impose his will. He worked side by side with Ellie and Logan, listening to their ideas, respecting their wishes, and contributing in a way that reflected the unity everyone was celebrating. On the big day, the garden was stunning. Flowers of all colors adorned the place, and the chairs were arranged under the shade of the large tree that Maisie had planted years ago in memory of her late husband. She now sat in the front row, watching with tearful eyes the love that united her daughter and Logan, and that now also united two families that had, for so long, lived in completely different worlds. When Ellie walked into the garden, dressed in a simple but beautiful white dress, all eyes turned to her, but her gaze was fixed on Logan, who was waiting for her at the altar. As she reached his side, Ellie took his hands, and they exchanged looks that said everything words could not express. The celebrant, a close family friend, began the ceremony with a warm smile. "Today, we're not just celebrating the union of Ellie and Logan, we're celebrating the union of two families, of two stories that crossed paths in an unexpected way, and that together are building a future based on love, respect, and understanding." Archie, sitting next to Maisie, felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. He looked at Maisie, and without needing to say anything, the two shared a moment of deep understanding. They had come from different worlds, but now they were united by the love of their children and the project that had transformed their lives. When Ellie and Logan exchanged vows, they were not just promises of eternal love, but also of continuing Maisie's legacy and that of all those who came before them. The wedding symbolized more than the union of two people. It was the realization of a future that honored the past and promised to build something beautiful and lasting. As the sun began to set, Ellie and Logan shared their first kiss as husband and wife, under applause and tears of joy. Maisie's house, which had once been threatened with demolition, was now the symbol of a new family, a new beginning, and a love that had overcome all adversities. A few days after the ceremony, Ellie found Maisie sitting on the porch, looking out at the garden that had been the setting for one of the happiest moments of their lives. Ellie quietly approached, sitting down next to her mother, and they sat in silence for a while, letting the soft sound of the wind and the birdsong fill the air. "Mum?" Ellie began, her voice low and full of emotion. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for me, for us. The wedding was perfect, and none of this would have been possible without you." Maisie smiled, her eyes shining with pride and love. "Dear, what I did was just the beginning. Now it's your turn to carry it on, to take forward everything you believe in, and I know you'll do it beautifully." Ellie held her mother's hand, feeling the fragility that once seemed so distant. "I wish so much that you could stay here, for a lot longer." Maisie gently stroked Ellie's hand, with a serene but understanding look. "I know, my love, but life has its own time, and I've lived so much, seen so much. I'm at peace with what's to come." At that moment, Logan appeared on the porch, bringing a cup of tea for Maisie. He knelt beside her, offering the cup with a caring smile. "Here you go, Miss Maisie, made just the way you like it." Maisie accepted the tea, thanking him with a nod. "Thank you, Logan. You're a good lad. I'm so happy Ellie has you by her side." Logan, visibly moved, held Maisie's other hand. "I'm the luckiest one for finding Ellie, and I promise you that I'll always take care of her." Maisie looked at them both, her heart full of love and gratitude. She knew she was leaving Ellie in good hands, and that gave her a peace that words couldn't describe. "You two are my greatest joy, and seeing how you love and support each other gives me the certainty that everything will be all right." Maisie's health, however, was deteriorating rapidly. She no longer had the energy to walk in the garden, and she spent more time resting, surrounded by the memories the house held so well. But she never complained, preferring to focus on the moments of happiness she could still share. In the weeks that followed, Ellie and Logan spent every possible moment by Maisie's side, knowing that every second was precious. Archie, meanwhile, visited often, bringing small joys to Maisie, like fresh flowers or funny stories from his youth. He also continued to work on the recycling project, which had become a living tribute to Maisie's legacy. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned orange and pink, Maisie asked to see Ellie and Logan together. With visible effort, she sat up in bed, holding their hands and looking deeply into their eyes. "You have something special, something many people spend their whole lives searching for and never find," Maisie said, her voice soft but full of conviction. "Take care of that love. Protect it, nurture it every day, and never forget what really matters." Ellie and Logan nodded, tears in their eyes, feeling the weight of Maisie's words, which echoed not just as advice but as a final blessing. Maisie, even weak, smiled at them, conveying all her strength and love through that simple gesture. "I love you both," Maisie whispered, feeling that each word carried a piece of her heart. "And I will always be with you, in one way or another." At that moment, Ellie and Logan knew they were saying goodbye, even without the word being spoken. They embraced Maisie with all the love they could, as twilight gently fell over the house that would soon become a sanctuary of memories, of love, and of a legacy that would live on forever. In that moment, with Ellie and Logan by her side, Maisie felt that her mission was complete. She blessed each of them with a look full of love, knowing that what had started in this house, with so much effort and dedication, would continue to flourish through the lives she had touched. As twilight enveloped the house, Maisie closed her eyes, her frail body finally finding rest, surrounded by those she loved. She took her last breath in peace, with a serene smile on her face. Ellie and Logan remained by her side, holding her hands, feeling the emptiness settle in each of their hearts. But at the same time there was a calmness, a certainty that Maisie had lived fully, leaving behind a legacy that would never be forgotten. The next morning, the house was wrapped in an aura of respect and gratitude. The news of Maisie's passing spread quickly, and soon friends, neighbors, and even those who had been touched by her work in recycling began to arrive, bringing flowers, words of comfort, and most importantly, stories of how Maisie had impacted their lives. The garden she loved so much was now filled with memories and a deep sense of loss mixed with admiration. Despite the pain she felt, Ellie knew her mother would want her to be strong. She took charge of the funeral arrangements, organizing a simple but meaningful ceremony. Ellie wanted everyone to remember Maisie for who she was, a determined woman who dedicated her life to the well-being of others and the preservation of the environment. On the day of the funeral, The garden was full of people who came to pay their respects. The sky was cloudy, but a soft light broke through the clouds, illuminating the spot where Maisie would be laid to rest, under the large tree she had planted with so much care. Ellie and Logan stood side by side, supporting each other, while Archie, now more a part of the family than ever, stood just behind them, feeling the loss as deeply as they did. When the time came, Ellie stood up, her voice trembling but determined, and began to speak. "My mother was a force of nature. She transformed everything she touched, not just recyclable materials, but also lives. She taught us the value of small things, of persistence, and of unconditional love. She fought for everything she believed in, and that's why we're here today, not just to mourn her passing, but to celebrate the legacy she left us." Ellie's words echoed in the hearts of everyone present, and many heads nodded in recognition of the impact Maisie had on their lives. Logan then stepped forward, holding Ellie's hand and continuing the speech. "What Maisie left us is not just a house or a project. She left us an example, a mission. The recycling system we're developing is just the beginning. We want to honor her work and expand it so more people can see the value in caring for the world we live in." Archie, moved, also spoke. "I was fortunate to meet Maisie later in life, but she changed everything for me. She showed me that success isn't measured by what we possess, but by what we do for the good of others. And it's with that spirit that I want to continue alongside Ellie and Logan, helping to ensure Maisie's legacy lives on." After the words, there was a moment of silence. People began to say their goodbyes, leaving flowers on the coffin and sharing memories of Maisie. Ellie, Logan, and Archie were the last to leave, each placing a rose and making a silent promise to continue the work Maisie had started. As the earth covered the coffin, Ellie felt a new strength within her. Her mother was gone, but what she had built, the love she had spread, and the example she had set would continue to live on. Ellie knew that, together with Logan and Archie, she could transform the recycling project into something that truly honored Maisie's life. At the end of the day, when everyone had left, Ellie, Logan, and Archie remained in the garden, watching the sunset. Ellie took Logan's hand, feeling his warmth and support, while Archie moved closer, placing a hand on both their shoulders. "She would be proud of you," Archie said, his voice low and sincere, "and so am I." Ellie smiled, with tears in her eyes, but a heart full of determination. "Let's do this, together. Let's honor my mother and change the world, one step at a time." And so, with a firm commitment in their hearts, Ellie, Logan, and Archie began to plan the future. A future that would not only continue Maisie's work, but expand her vision, inspiring generations to take better care of the planet and of each other. Maisie had gone, but her legacy of love, innovation, and strength would continue to flourish like the plants she had so carefully tended, leaving a lasting mark on the world she loved so much. As the months passed, Maisie's house, once just a cozy home for a family, transformed into something much bigger. The garden, once a space of tranquility and memories, became a place of gathering, learning, and inspiration for the community. People came from afar to see where it all began, drawn by the story of a woman who, with courage and determination, planted the seeds of a movement that would grow and flourish far beyond the boundaries of that backyard. Ellie and Logan, dedicated to honoring Maisie's legacy, expanded the recycling project, transforming the house into a community center for sustainability. There, they held workshops, lectures, and events that taught people about the importance of recycling, environmental preservation, and the impact that small actions can have on the world. Archie, now fully involved in the project, used his influence to attract investments and partnerships that allowed Maisie's initiative to reach other communities. The recycling center, named Maisie's House, became a beacon of innovation. The revolutionary system that Ellie and Logan developed with Archie's support not only drastically reduced waste in the city, but also generated clean energy to power the house and other buildings around it. People began to see recycling not as a chore, but as an opportunity to be part of something bigger, to contribute to a better future. One afternoon, as Ellie watched a group of children learning about composting in the garden, Logan approached, wrapping her in a loving embrace. "Look at this, Ellie," he said, with a proud smile. "Everything your mum started, it's now becoming a real movement. She'd be so proud to see what we've done." Ellie nodded, her eyes shining with tears of emotion. "I feel like she's here, Logan, in every plant, in every person who comes through this place. All of this is what she always dreamed of. And it's just the beginning." The impact of Maisie's house spread quickly. Journalists came to tell the story of how a simple idea of recycling, born in a small house, had turned into a global initiative. Schools from all over the country began visiting the center, bringing their students to learn about sustainability in a practical and inspiring way. Maisie's legacy, now lived by all who passed through, inspired a new generation to care for the planet, to value the small things, and to understand that every action, no matter how small, can have a significant impact. Archie, who once tried to tear down that house to build another of his restaurants, now walked through the garden with a sense of fulfillment and gratitude. He had become a fervent advocate for the environmental cause, using his resources and influence to spread Maisie's message beyond the country's borders. His personal transformation was a testament to the power of a well-lived legacy, and he knew that everything he was doing now was to honor the memory of a woman who had changed his life forever. At the heart of all this was the house, simple and welcoming, but now filled with profound meaning. The place where Maisie once fought alone for recycling now pulsed with life, energy, and progress. Every corner of the house told a story of unity, perseverance, and love, and every person who passed through it carried a piece of that legacy with them. And so, Maisie's house became more than a symbol of unity and progress. It became a beacon of hope, inspiring future generations to continue the work she started, to care for the world they lived in, and to understand that even the simplest actions can change the world.